Hello and welcome to this edition of the Religion Hurts podcast. My name is Mike Harrison, and I'm really excited to have you here with me as I do this video series. Really the purpose of this video series is for sharing my testimony. Just a lot of things that have gone on. You can watch the first video that I did, and be able to just kind of go through an overview of everything in my life that I'm going to be end up talking about. But from a really abusive childhood, and obviously as a teenager, to ending up in a cult in my early 30s for about 10 years, to just losing everything. The missions fields of Africa right now, just lots of things that have gone on in my life, and I just want to share some of that with you. So I've just been working through these series here as a step-by-step. This is video number 3, and just getting into kind of my teenage years here and continuing the story. Please feel free to check out the other videos, but super excited to have you here. The other heart for why I do this podcast is that I really want to see people that have gone through, some church hurts and different things like that. I just really want them to know that there's you're not alone. There's a feeling. I remember this. I was in youth group years and years and years ago as a teenager, and I remember I was listening to a speaker, and the speaker said, one of the enemy's tactics is to make us feel like we're alone and nobody else is here with us. And what our issues are individual, and I just remember, sins and just different things. And I'd be sitting there with these sins, struggling with sin or whatever it would be. And I'd be thinking, I must be the worst person in the world. My parents don't struggle with this. I'm sure my brother doesn't struggle, or my sisters don't struggle, or the rest of my family doesn't struggle. None of my friends struggle with these things. I must be the only one struggling. And the reality is that's just not the case. We all struggle. We all sin, but we've all also been hurt. We've all gone through a lot of these situations, and we all need healing. We all need love. And we all need people that feel like they can understand where we're at and what we've gone through. And that's a big part of my heart with this video series, is just talking about the things that I've gone through, partly to be able to put words to my testimony and just give God the glory and recognize what he's done in my life, but also just to encourage anybody else that's going through anything. Like, it doesn't matter what you're going through, there is a way through it. God still has a plan for you. There's still life for you. There's still community for you. There's still people out there that that you can connect with and have that difference. I was talking to my really good friend Brian last night. Been a while since we talked, but I was talking to him last night, and he was relaying to me a story about his pastor. They were at a big convention, and pastor gave a message about how it's one thing to be bitten by a lion or be bitten by a wolf. We kind of almost expect that. It's not, it hurts, it still hurts, but it's not unexpected that a wolf will come in. Like, okay, giving context, God often refers to us in the Bible as his lambs, right? That's how he sees us. And so you would expect, a wolf to come in and attack a lamb and come after one of, God's children. And it's never a good thing, but it wouldn't surprise you. It hurts a whole lot more. This was the point of what the pastor said, is that it hurts a whole lot more when you're bitten by another lamb. And I think there's so many people that are walking away from church, walking away from God, walking away from relationships because they've been absolutely torn to pieces by other lambs, or at least it seems that way. I know in my life, I have been torn to pieces again and again by people claiming to be Christians that have no real, walk in their life, as evidenced by the fruit as life went on. At the time, I didn't know, and that's a lot of what I'm going to get into with these videos, is just talking about my journey and my experience, and with the ultimate hope of encouragement. I'm just, my heart's for people that have, like I said, been hurt by church, or struggle with addictions. I've struggled with addictions, and we'll get into that in later videos, or abuse. I got into the last video talking about how I grew up in a home filled with abuse. I was abused regularly, especially mentally and emotionally as I got older, but physically and even sexually as I was young. And there's hope through all of those things. Yeah, I want to read the scripture here now that I'm kind of basing this podcast off, and it's in James 1:27. Pure and undefiled religion in the sight of God our Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. So I've got my laptop here in front of me as I'm learning how to navigate doing this process and keeping my notes there. So if I'm looking down at all, that's what I'm doing, is looking at my laptop. Also, sometimes I look to the left as I'm thinking, and so I apologize if it looks like I'm staring off into space. I just sometimes have a hard time keeping straight forward. But anyways, enjoying doing this and learning to get better and better every time. As I said in the last video, it reminds me of Luke 10:27, that where it says, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." And really, that's, to me, that's the beginning of pure religion, or pure Christianity, or Jesus' love is love the Lord your God, love your neighbor. And those two things matter more than pretty much everything else. And if you're doing those two things, then in my view, that's the first step in Christianity, is loving God and loving your neighbor. So I want to get into a little bit today. I kind of ended off with kind of my childhood and stuff with my dad. So I believe I mentioned that my dad got a lung disease. This was when I was probably about 12 years old. He ended up in the hospital twice with pneumonia. And he was in there quite a long time. And up until that point, my dad had always seemed like this very strong guy. He was a superintendent for a construction company, very strong, very tough guy. And all of a sudden he was in the hospital. He was getting sick, and they didn't know what was going on. Well, come to find out, he had a disease called sarcoidosis, which affects the lungs. And from what I understand, it's been a long time since I did any looking into this, and I could define it a little bit better if need to. But essentially, you get these things that kind of attach to your lungs, and your white blood cells go to kill, these little nodules and stuff. And over time, it thickens your lungs until they get thicker and thicker and less flexible, and it cuts down your ability to breathe. And the hard part is, to fight against sarcoidosis, you need to keep being active and keep an active lifestyle, and keep doing cardio and things of that nature. Keep working to expand your lungs, but at the same time, your lungs are stopping working, so they're not letting you breathe properly anymore, and your air capacity is going down and down and down, and so you need to keep pushing them, but at the same time, you're losing that capacity whether you want to or not. And so it just becomes a struggle. And he was a superintendent for this large construction company in close to Toronto. And that company bought a company in southern Manitoba, right north of Roseau, Minnesota, right on the border, that was building wood boilers, like wood for personal residences. You have an outdoor wood unit that you could throw firewood in. It heats water up and brings that hot water into a heat exchanger and heats your house. And this company bought it. So as a superintendent, they sent my dad out to Manitoba to go look at the company and kind of set up some accounts and just do some business type stuff. I was 14 at the time, and we came as a family out to Manitoba, and we went from living an hour from Toronto in quite a city area to kind of the middle of nowhere. The closest major town in Canada was an hour away in Steinbach, and the next closest kind of town where we could do any real shopping, and even really not that much, was Roseau, Minnesota, and that was 20 minutes away. And the rest of the time we're just kind of way out in the middle of nowhere. We moved to this little town called Mendocino. We had no neighbors. Just it sounds ideal to me right now because I love the wide open now, but at the time it was such a shock to anything I'd grown up with. All my grandparents, I had all four of my grandparents at that time lived there, all my cousins. We had a really big families that were really close. We got to do a lot with our cousins and our family, not just all the holidays, but all the time. And now, next thing you know, we're just out here in it, all my friends, everything. So we moved out to this place where the goal was to be for a few months. But my dad, because he had this lung disorder or disease, he started realizing that being out there and in that area was really, beneficial to him. He was being able to breathe a lot easier. He liked the pace of work a lot better. So he ended up making a deal with the company that he was part of, and he left his normal his salary that he'd been getting in Ontario behind, and got hired at a new hourly rate, and just became one of the guys for the crews there in Manitoba, and just stayed now working in this boiler place. But we, because of the time of year we moved and everything, we were homeschooled. And so now we've been homeschooled 1 year in preparation in Ontario, but we were part of a homeschooling group. We're going to a church. We had all kinds of friends. Everything was, being homeschooled then was, I loved it. I could get my schoolwork done by noon, and I was out playing street hockey, in no time at all. And I didn't mind not having to go to school every day. Next thing you know, we're out in the middle of the wilderness with nothing and nobody around, and now being homeschooled, and we're just me and I had 3 siblings, 2 sisters and a brother, and just us. And it got lonelier and lonelier. Then you take my dad, who of course we already talked about was pretty abusive. We're just sitting there now with him most of the time, and we get out a little bit for, we found a little country church that we could go to on Sundays, and so we did that, and I made a couple friends there, and ended up getting to play baseball, and did get to, a few friends in those areas, and those were kind of my lifelines. Those were the only things that I had that I could hang on to bring any kind of hope and encouragement during that time frame. And I didn't understand depression at all at that time. I didn't understand what depression even was for years. But when I look back at it now, I really struggled with feeling quite lonely, quite hopeless, and quite depressed. And I remember a pretty big period in that time, from about 14 to 16, off and on in there, that I really, really struggled. And I thought about and often planned my own suicide. I was really thought it out, really tried to figure out how that would work and how free I would be. And it sounds horrible to say, but I would fantasize about being able to just say goodbye to the world and goodbye to all my problems, and how it would just be over. And then there was also a part of me that says this would show my dad what he did, and I had watched, there was this video series, I don't know anybody that around the same time as me, that my friends had gotten in Ontario, and when we still lived there, and we would watch these video series called Fire by Night. It was geared towards youth groups, and it would have like a these characters that would do kind of like a TV show, and so every video series had another episode of this TV show, and they would talk about different issues like drugs and alcohol and different things, and it was pretty formative for me. And in this video series, they talked about how suicide was the most selfish thing a person could ever do, because it was just, I don't even remember all the details. I just remember that sticking with me. And it often is the only thing that kept me from doing things, because I didn't want to be selfish, and I didn't want to put my mom through that pain, and I didn't want to put my grandparents through that pain. And it was a really, really dark time, obviously. And incidentally, we started going to a youth group. We moved out of Mendocino, and we moved closer to our high school in South Junction, which was, instead of being 40 minutes away, it was 20 minutes away. And then my parents, I begged my parents, they let me go to high school, starting in the 10th grade. So I started going to school then, and, it was a little awkward at first, of course, new kid in school and whatever, but as I began to make some friends, and then I had the youth group, that gave me just a little glimmer and a little bit of whatever. I started playing basketball and getting in some sports and getting to do that stuff. That at least gave me some kind of connection. But also in there, we would go to this little country church, and there was a youth leaders, or there were a couple, Ken and Lori. And Ken and Lori were just this amazing down-to-earth couple that just loved teens, just loved to just be involved in teens. They'd have them over to their house all the time. And I never asked them, with a feeling that I get in looking back, is that the way they treated me is like I was one of their kids. They just, right from day one, welcomed me in, loved me. And I was sitting there one day after church and I was talking to Lori and I said, because she played guitar on Sunday mornings. And I was watching her play guitar and I wanted to talk to her about it. So I was just sitting there going, I would love to learn how to play guitar. And she goes, okay. So she brought me her guitar. The next Sunday, she brought me her guitar. She taught me 3 or 4 chords and said, this is how you play the chords. And at that time, we had the projectors up on the screen at the front of the church, and somebody would, flip the projectors. And that's how in church you would sing. You could see the words up on the screen, but it also had the chords above each word. And I would sit there, and they weren't complicated songs, especially at this time frame, early to mid 90s. And I knew what a D was, and I knew what a G was, and I knew what an A was. And I would sit there and just work on getting my fingers on just getting my D done on the right timing. And then I try to strum the chord once. And then while I was sitting, I would literally sit on the front pew. We had wood pews there. I'd sit on the front pew while they're doing their worship and everybody else is doing stuff. And my dad hated it, thought it was the stupidest thing, of course. And some other people made fun of me, but Lori just said, just do it, just learn. And I'd sit there and do this. And as I picked that up over a couple months, she let me take this guitar home, and I learned just a couple worship songs. I'd fallen in love with just a couple worship songs, and I'd sit in my room at night when that darkness would come. Sorry, I get just a little emotional thinking about it. And I'd sit in my night when that darkness would come. I don't mean the darkness outside, I mean the darkness inside. And I just play music, we weren't allowed to listen to secular music. There was no Christian radio stations. If you wanted to go downstairs to the living room, you could listen to Sandy Patty or Keith Green on my parents' stereo system. But I wasn't allowed to listen to any of my own music. And so I would fall in love with these few worship songs and just sit there and play them over and over and sing quietly to myself. And in that, doing that worshiping, I would find peace. And it was through that peace that that's what brought me through, incidentally. That saved my life. Worship music saved my life. So for those of you that are watching that know me, you know how much I love doing sound, how much I love getting up on stage and playing bass or electric or acoustic, but that's above all things, that's where it comes from, is I just fell in love with worship music. It was a way that I could find and connect to feeling that God was real, and it literally saved my life. Through there, I made a few different friends and some of that, but I also met a young man. His name was Nathan Yoder around that time, and I would have been 14 or 15 years old, and I met him in there. He's from North Dakota, and we just kind of guy that we just became immediate best friends, and we talk on the phone here and there, and thankfully our parents liked each other enough that we could go back and forth between them. Actually, incidentally, my youngest sister's married to his youngest brother right now, which is awesome. Still connected to that family, and until a few years ago when Nathan passed, him and I stayed pretty much best friends all through that time. He was one of those guys that just no matter what was the friend that I needed, and always. And I'll talk maybe a little bit more about him someday, and especially some stuff that I went through after he passed in a car accident a few years ago. But those kind of things happened within a couple of years, and I really believe God brought a friend when I needed a friend. I learned to worship when I needed to worship, and it saved my life. And so I'm just really thankful. I've had this thing up here on my laptop for a couple days. I'm getting close to my time here, so I'm going to kind of just bring this up a little bit, and maybe we'll get into it on the next episode. But it's called the ACEs test, or the ACE test. And this is something somebody had me do as part of my counseling and just different things that I was going through. It's just kind of a really fascinating thing if you want to do any research. The ACE test is used to determine the effects of childhood trauma on your life. And I had no idea what it would be like. And, you know, it has these just 10-question tests. And you answer yes, no, or not sure to the 10 questions. And, you know, for example, question 1, did a parent or other adult in the household often swear at you, insult you, or put you down? Number 2, did a parent or other adult in the household often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? So I did this ACE test, and I got 6 yeses out of the ACE test. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I'm guessing 8 to 10 is pretty bad. Only to do a little research and then finding out that, you know, 1 gives you some level of childhood trauma, and one of them is like, did your parents get divorced? Which my parents never did. So, but that's actually one of the things on here. But 1, you know, isn't too bad. A little bit will affect you. 2 can be, you know, kind of damaging. 3 can be really tough, and then they go anything over 4. And the amount of effect on your life of childhood trauma compounds really extreme. And it's been something that's been kind of fascinating to learn just about and the effects of those things. And so I'll probably get into a little bit of that stuff maybe in a later date and video, just in dealing with childhood trauma, but just kind of wanted to share a little bit of that. My goal is to kind of sit around that 20 to 22 minutes, right? And so it's about where I'm at. So I'm going to sign off here. Just again, want to say I really appreciate you guys watching this video. I'm going to keep dropping every Tuesday evening going forward is my goal. And yeah, I just really appreciate doing this. Next week, we'll get into kind of maybe the tail end of just different stuff and kind of towards me meeting Christy and the next stage of life. But anyways, just appreciate every one of you listening. And just thank you. Just pray that God blesses you and blesses your week. All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.